Chelsea have released their kit today without a front of shirt sponsor. It's the first time it's happened since, I think I would going to go early 90s when they didn't have a sponsor, very early in the 90s, maybe late 80s, when halfway through the season they picked up Simod. But it's the first time that any Big Six club has launched a Premier League kit without a main sponsor. Clubs say that when a new sponsor is found, the club can distribute brand patches that fans can iron on to their own shirts.
Okay. Right. This Todd Boehly doesn't know what he's doing, does he? He's an idiot, this idiot American.
Several deals that had been viewed as suitable and lucrative fell through, included a contract with Paramount Plus that was vetoed by the Premier League. We'll talk about that in just a second. But the big one, obviously, is the gambling company's stake, which provoked a furious reaction from fans. Fans didn't want it to happen. So Todd Boehly and his team at Chelsea pulled the contract, didn't do it. Now, Chelsea's main sponsor last year was from 3.
Yeah.
They got them £40 million a year.
Yeah.
And Chelsea are missing out on some quite substantial revenues by not having one. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, if they haven't got a sponsor, you just worked out what they're missing out on. I mean, Chelsea sell a lot of shirts. They're one of the biggest clubs for selling merchandise. So they'll sell 1.3 million, 1.5 million shirts around the world, maybe even more. And so the revenues that they're going to get from that sort of deal are going to be significant. They're going to be upwards of 50, 60, 70 million quid. Now, that will be the replica's kit. So with that in mind, they've still got that deal because they've launched a new kit with lots of highfalutin imagery of Dennis Wise and Roberto Di Matteo sitting there as throwback retro.
Retro's in at the moment, isn't it? It's a 90s thing.
Apparently. But you've now got a situation where, last year Nottingham Forest started the season without a commercial sponsor. I think that's because they had delusions of grandeur about what they could sell it for and found out the market wasn't quite as big as they thought it could be. In this instance, Chelsea have gone from one sponsor that their fan base didn't like to another sponsor which contravenes broadcasting parameters that the Premier League will enable or allow.
And why is that then? I don't get this.
Well, because the distribution deals have been done and they didn't really want to allow the promotion of another broadcaster that will be carrying some content.
Is that breaking Premier League rules, or is that just we don't like it very much?
Well, if it wasn't breaking Premier League rules, they'd be doing it, wouldn't they?
Would they? Or is it just that they're being diplomatic?
Well, I'm not entirely sure the diplomacy sits necessarily in the mindset of Todd Boehly as a default setting to achieve outcomes which he will think is fair and equitable. You can be diplomatic and fair at the same time, and if you're being treated unfairly, there's no need for diplomacy. I would suspect that the nature of the parameters that were surrounding the Paramount Plus deal in some shape or form contravened Premier League rules, hence that otherwise they would have done it. The betting one, well, look, that's a view you've got to take. If you spent £2.5 billion on buying a brand, or what you consider to be a brand, I'm not sure if it is a brand, because I'm not entirely sure what the brand values would be of Chelsea, besides the fact they're a big football club bought and built by Roman Abramovich that operate at the high ends of the Premier League, not last season, but as a matter of course. But they've spent £2.5 billion on it, and they want no jeopardy. He'll want no jeopardy. And if the conversation moves on, because I think one of the things that Todd looks at is the nature of the data and the eyes on the prize and anonymised data to be able to value what the fan base are thinking and doing from a monetising point of view, because
that's what it's all about.
Well, if you're going to spend £2.5 billion on a football club, it's about something. It's not about being philanthropic, is it?
No,
I mean, we're not all going to run around
winning.
We're not all going to run around
no
like
Sir
Jim Radcliffe doing it purely and simply for philanthropic reasons. And there are very few Roman Abramovich that do it for different reasons, like perhaps the world's most expensive life insurance policy once upon a time. But the bottom line is that they will have a shirt sponsor. Chelsea will go and get a shirt sponsor. I know that the en vogue message at this moment in time is Boehly and everything with Chelsea. They don't know what they're doing. They came in there, they've spent too much money, they bought the wrong players.
Because they finished in the bottom half of the Premier League table.
Well,
a lot of the narrative is set by that.
People, yes, but it's a lazy narrative and it's an easy one to go to. It's one bad season. Chelsea finished 10th in 2016 or whenever it was, and they won the league the next year. So we've got to get some consistency in this. We've had a change of ownership, a change of direction. The whole board has gone out, whether I thought much of Bruce Buck, or whether Mourinho was once upon a time Roman Abramovich's secretary and been brought up to mythical heights of what she added value to. There was a new ownership model.
She was formidable.
She may well have been.
She scared the hell out of me.
Absolutely. She was very good at measuring up desks for Roman as well, for his room apparently. But the point is this.
She was
is that you get into the territory of a new ownership model with new direction. They've made some mistakes. I'll tell you about these fellas. They won't make them twice. There'll be quick studies. Whether I think Pochettino is going to win Chelsea or anything, different discussion. but Chelsea will be at the races next year. And then little things like, they haven't got a shirt sponsor. Listen, the only people that's going to cost...
It's not a little thing, it's 40 million quid.
But who's got to write that check out then? You? The fans? No, Todd Boehly. So I think his mind will be focused on making sure that they've got a shirt sponsor, and what we're doing and what the common narrative at this moment is.
No, we're asking the question.
But it's not a big deal. I don't think it's a big deal. The only person it should be a big deal to really is Todd Boehly.
Well,
because Todd Boehly's got to bridge the gap.
Is there an argument? And that football fans like this kind of stuff, actually. The idea of being...
They like division.
No, they like the idea of being able to buy the shirt without the sponsor.
Do they?
True. Yeah, I think so.
Then wonderful. Then Todd Boehly's pulled an absolute marketing masterstroke.
In which case, could this be actually... Could you make as much money out of selling more shirts because you haven't got a sponsor than if you did one? Is there a way of making that math work?
No, not really. You'd have to. I mean, if you're thinking, if we are led to believe that the commercial endorsement is 40 million quid, you'd probably have to take your shirt sales up from 1.7, 1.8 million to nearer 3 million to bridge that gap.
You'd have to double it.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any clubs out there in the world that are doing that right now. And Chelsea aren't going to do that.
Is it concerned that Chelsea have got FFP problems and therefore this might impact on them?
But that's your version of it. Chelsea haven't said they've got FFP problems.
We're asking the question. Could it contribute to that?
Well, if you've lost £40 million of revenue on today's date, which you don't replace, it doesn't help it, does it? Right? But the bottom line is that the reasons why Boehly signed players on 8-year deals was because he wanted to amortise and depreciate the players over 8-year contracts. And quite why the Premier League decided to change that principle, because I already think the accountancy valuation of players is flawed anyway. You should be able to value players when you if you sign a player for a 5-year contract and then you re-sign them 2 years in for another 5 years, you should be able to revalue them properly. And it's an unfair nuance of the accountancy principles that flow around football clubs.
It doesn't really make sense, that, does it? Because
you're not carrying the real value of players, so you're not helping your balance sheet. So if you're going to be in a situation where financial fair play is about profit and sustainability, then assets should be valued at their real value. But anyway, that's a different discussion. I think they would have priced in every aspect of what they were doing. They wouldn't have priced in finishing 12th, right? And of course, ultimately, 5 or 6 places, Premier League meritocracy might have been something they would have figured in their mindset as a worst case scenario. Would have been another 15-20 million quid of revenue. But the fact that they've got a lot of carrying stock, and when I carrying stock, I mean human beings. I mean the asset class of young players like Callum Hudson-Odoi, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Mason Mount, and a few
Conor
others that they go out
Gallagher.
there, and Pulisic, that quite frankly hasn't pulled up that many trees.
He'll be leaving, I think.
And the fact that he's going to go out as a profit on the balance sheet right now, because if he's bought for 50 million quid 5 years into a contract or 4 years into a contract, he's probably going to be on a carrying value of about 10. So that all of these are structured thinking. Whether you agree with the player selection process, well, Pochettino's got lots of currency, and I would imagine that he thinks that they've got an opportunity. Now let's turn it into a mini. Let's talk it down into a mini, because really we've got a Ferrari here. You've got a guy in there that can tune this engine in Pochettino. How loud it can rev and how far it can go, that's a different discussion. But I don't think that there's anything about Chelsea's positioning, besides the fact they've had a stinker of a season last year, that will tell us that this will continue. It will not continue on Boehly's watch.
You're very pro Todd Boehly. Do you play paddle tennis with him as well?
No, I'm not very pro Todd Boehly. I'm very anti a negative, one-dimensional, vacuous, lazy characterisation of people. I had years of it as an owner, so every time I see it being done to someone else, I dislike it. Because I want people to actually, yes, it's really easy. He made mistakes. You show me someone that doesn't make mistakes, and I'll show you someone that never tried anything, right? Now, of course, football's very tribalistic, and of course, it's a ridicule opportunity because you spent 600 million quid. These guys will zero down, and they'll be lean and mean next year. Whether they can catch Man City, I doubt it. But I think you'll see a formidable Chelsea side next year.
We'd love to have him in to discuss it, that's for sure.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.